Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Uplifting Impact podcast. My name is Deanna Singh.
And I'm Justin Ponder, and we're with Uplifting Impact.
We are uplifting impact. That's what we're doing on a daily basis. It's not just a noun, it's also a verb. And we are excited to be hosting you today as we dive deeper into our journey to make the world a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive place.
Today, we're talking about how to stay motivated, a very important topic. And when we do all kinds of, whether it's coaching or strategic planning, consulting, training, it's something that comes up quite often. They say, hey, we've been at this work a long time. I'm encountering difference. Things are changing so much. I see so much resistance, or I've just been tired from how long I've been doing this. How do I stay motivated? So, Deanna, what are some of the things that people say are causing complications with their motivation?
I think because this work can feel so deeply personal, right? What we're talking about a lot is our own social identities and identities of others. And a lot of people come into this space because they're already naturally like really empathetic and they're also naturally servant leaders. And so you have a lot of people who are in the space who just want everything to be better right away. Like I always say this to you, like I never want you to have a bad day, and I never want any of the people who are on our team to have a bad day. And I never want any of the people that we work with to have a bad day. And so when I see that there's things that are challenges or people are not feeling like they can thrive in the workplace, like I take that personally. And so I think one of the biggest things that I see, at least in the work that I do and conversations that I'm having with people, is that it feels really personal. I don't know. And that hurts, right? When you feel like you can't make a change for somebody right away.
And something along that same line of, hey, I want to help. I want to help right now. And I'm very personally invested. I think also in there is maybe some traditional persuasion models of there's this problem that harms some people. And everyone must be as empathetic as I am and also in the way that I am. So the only thing that's needed to create more inclusion is education. Like, people are just doing this because they don't know. And so if I just provide this bit of education, if they just know these things, automatically things will change. And I'm not promoting like kind of the cynical route, like people know and don't care. I think it's way more complicated than that. I think it's that people know and they want to change. It's hard amongst the whirlwind of all their other daily priorities. Even the people who are very much on board, I think it becomes very hard for a lot of them to see, I'm excited. I agree. I've learned the stuff. I'm ready to make a change. And then 3 weeks later, I'm tired or I have so many other things I have to do.
Yeah. I mean, and I think other things that make people tired is just like the reality. We are being asked to do a lot, oftentimes with very little resources, whether that's money or time or other people to support us along the way. We're having to deal with things that are not just in our space. I have so many people that I talk to are like, I am head of, diversity, equity, and inclusion in our company, but I also have to do a lot with Marcom. And I also have to do a lot with like event planning. And I also have to do a lot with HR. And I also am doing this right. And so you're wearing a lot of hats. So I think there's just like the wear and tear too of
Mhm.
being in a role that is so prominent and in a role that has so many responsibilities and not always being resourced the way that we need to be in order to get it done. So I think I could go on and on about like the different challenges, but if I had to sum it up of like what's going on, I think that it's coming from like a place of wanting things to change and the frustration that comes with how slow this work can be sometimes. I think it's also coming from a place of just being exhausted by the pure volume and the speed at which things are happening around us. A lot to your point too, this idea that yeah, I'm in a situation where I feel like so many things are happening all around me and I don't really know what my role is or my responsibility is in it or how I can take myself out and see how you constantly have to mind bend, right? Like this is how I see the situation. That's easy. But I got to think about how you might see the situation, how somebody in totally different identity group, some totally different background. I got to see the situation in so many different ways. Like that's exhausting too. I got to put so many different lenses on in this role. So I think it's just a lot of those
Yeah.
things that fill it up. But I have a question back for you.
Okay.
Okay, so we do this work too.
Yeah.
And so all the things that I just mentioned, I'm like, oh, now I'm feeling tired too. I'm feeling a little worn out. Oh my gosh, this is bringing it right back up to the top for me, right? Like, because these are all things that we're experiencing too, even though we're coming into organizations and we're supporting, it's almost like multiplied because I get to see it in one organization, another organization, right? I have all the feels for all the people that we are working with. And I know you do too, Justin. So my question is, how do you keep your spirit up? Like, how do you stay positive and thinking and moving forward?
I like the way that you mentioned it because one, it provides something that I had never thought of before, like a particularity to how we approach this work, where folks who might not be consultants, might be in house somewhere, maybe don't have. But maybe I think that there is something to is that we work with many different organizations at once. And often in the same day, it'll be an hour meeting here with a set of opportunities and challenges. And then with a click of a button, another hour
Yeah.
with some completely different context. But even if someone's in-house or they're the head of their employee resource group or they're in HR and they're with the same organization, they're dealing with different constituencies, different individuals, different
Yeah.
departments. And what helps keep me motivated is listening. I have this very stubborn streak in me that is informed by the particular experiences I've had. That if I wait long enough and give people the room long enough to process and reflect, they come up with a lot of their own answers. I get very frustrated. Like, I'm like, okay, let's get to this faster. Like, here's the solution. And in my haste, I often say, I've listened to you for 2 minutes. This is the solution right here. Next. I want to be like that person, right? Like Jedi Knight of DI. This, next, this. We've solved all the problems. But it's amazing how often in my haste to get things done, and I think motivation will be solving things, I actually make things not worse, but I misunderstand things. Or I realize, yes, this is a solution for the organization, but maybe it's not the solution for you. Or yes, this is what would work for me, but it's not what's going to work in this particular separate thing. But if I just wait longer and listen longer and ask questions longer, they come to it doesn't take a whole lot more. They come up to the most authentic answers for themselves, their organization, their context that has the most sustainable answer. So I think patience and listening, because when I lose my motivation the most, can I be real?
Be real. That's what we do here.
All you out there, can I be real? Nod your head if I can. I get the most demotivated. I get the most discouraged when just me, arrogantly and egocentrically jump to conclusions about what should be done and people don't do it and it doesn't work.
Mm.
But I feel the most inspired and I feel the most motivated when I try to be patient and let people come to their own. So I maintain motivation by listening and asking questions so people reflect. What about you? How do you
Well,
maintain motivation?
I have a lot of answers to that question, but before we go there, I just want to point out something.
Yeah.
Because actually what you just said here, like you use the vehicle of listening, but the bigger skill, I think, in how you responded was moving yourself from the center.
Oh, yeah. That's a good way
And
to
I
say it.
think like because what you're describing when you're talking about listening, and I do this all the time, right? Like there's a problem, I see a solution. I know I have some tools that I can go ahead and deploy on them. And before somebody's even finished talking, I am already in problem solving mode. Like, how can I do this? And what can I do? You know what I'm saying? And it's again not coming from like a malicious place, but it is coming from like a servant leader. Like I want to
Mm.
serve. I want to be in a place where I can make your life easier. And so I'm going to jump right in as opposed to slowing down, removing myself as like, I have to be the one who comes up with all the solutions. I have to be the one who has all the answers. I have to be able to get there really quickly. And just remembering, no, if we're really creating an inclusive environment, everybody gets to be included in the solutions too.
And they get to help.
And they get
So
to
you
help.
don't get exhausted and feeling like you have to
Exactly.
carry it all.
So I think
Mm.
that's something that's just really important. Maybe it's like right sizing my expectations around what my role has to be or should be or
Mm.
is, and kind of keeping myself in check. So I think a lot of times, we take on more than what we really need to, and actually more than what's best for the situation.
Mm.
And so that to me, in our house, we call this over responding. Justin and I are notorious at over responding. And what we mean by that when we say it is like we see a situation and again, we like jump in, we want to solve it, we want to make it better, we want to make everybody else feel good. And sometimes it's like, no, maybe just wait a minute. Let whoever it is that you're talking to, maybe they just want to talk about it and they just want to get it off their chest, or maybe they're trying to problem solve it. And by you jumping in, you're taking away their power to be able to be part of their own solutions.
And you might be excluding them from their solutions. Or if you're the head of a DEI task force or the head of an HR unit or you're the head of an ERG, out of servant leadership, I will do this for them. And we miss an opportunity to do it with them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to create a culture of inclusion over the weekend by myself and show up on Monday and tell everybody this is what we're going to do. And then I'll be mad when they don't do what I said, or they don't do it the same way, or I'll be so exhausted and tired, as opposed to I will take 3 weeks and include people on how to create my process of creating inclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one. Like, it's just kind of right sizing where you're supposed to be and making sure that you're not holding all of it, that you really are sharing the solutioning. That's a word we use, right?
Yeah.
Solutioning.
Solutionating. Yeah, something like
Solutioning.
that. Well, that's the
I feel like in every podcast I come up with a new word that I'm either trying out or that doesn't
I like
exist
that.
or that, okay, great.
But
Fantastic.
that's the big we, the things that you think work best practices that we should be doing. But what about you personally? What do you do
Yeah,
to
no.
keep
So
motivated?
personally, actually a lot of things. I think one thing I feel very, very fortunate with is that I feel really confident in our team. And so when there is something that's going on that I can tell has gone into a space that is not,
Mm.
like that I'm struggling with it, right? Like I'm worn out or I'm tired with it. I make sure that within my colleagues and obviously within my marriage, right, and our family, to be like, hey, I need like 5 minutes. Can we set a timer? But I'm really struggling with this thing. And I think it's about having a crew. I think it's about creating your own safe spaces where you can have conversations about what it is that you're struggling with and somebody else that you trust that really can give you some perspective. One of the biggest compliments, I tell people this all the time, but we've had many, many chief diversity officers in our existence as Uplifting Impact tell us that we are on their speed dial. And for me, that is such a great compliment because what they mean by that is that when they're in their moment, we are their safe space. Like we are the place that they come to be able to have conversations about things that might be going on or things they're trying to work through or things that are happening and kind of looking and seeking that advice. And those phone calls are always great because one, it shows me, right, that we have built up that trust, but two, because I know that I need it. So it's nice to be able to do that for others, what I know that I need. So it's a very long way of saying, like, find your crew, find your safe space. Like for me, that's really important. And I have a couple different like text chains. I have a couple of different Slack places for different things, right? That I need
Yeah.
to go to and techniques, but all of it kind of comes back to that same core idea of who is in my crew that I can have a conversation with and be honest with and ask questions and do all that. And I feel supported.
And I hear 2 specific things I'd like to highlight in there is find your crew. And you said I have a list of different people.
Yeah.
It's like making sure like different people, different crews that don't all know each other.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And 2, that you mentioned find your crew. And the example you used was people developing their crew, their network outside of their organization.
Yes.
So it's important to have it. Like we talked to a lot of people who have it.
Turtle too.
Yeah. We have a lot of
outside
people who have it within, which is
Yeah.
cool. And it has its important virtues to it. But it's also important to like peek over the valley and have the same network with people that you can feel even more psychological safety with, because you can be completely transparent without fears of they'll go back and tell someone, or even just the fears of I know that they won't betray my confidence, but I'm worried that I will undermine their confidence by being honest by how discouraged or sad or frustrated I am. But also people being able to provide you perspective from a completely different organization, different industry. Like, nope, maybe just do this.
Mhm.
I never thought about that because I've been in here so long.
Yeah, sometimes they're so close to it, you can't really see it, and then
Mhm.
you need somebody else to point it out,
Yeah.
help you see it a little bit clearer. I think the other thing is, and I tell people this all the time, this work is hard, and it is personal, and it's hard to make it not personal. And so I think it's also important to just like understand for you as an individual, what are the things that restore you and making sure that you plan those just as much as you plan other things on your calendar and give them just as much time. Because I do think it's important. Like there have been times where I'm like, you know what? I feel a certain way about something and it's really impacting how I can show up today.
Mhm.
And being like, I'm going to need to cancel this meeting, which I hate to do. Oh my gosh, I hate canceling a meeting or I hate, not showing up where I'm expected, but being like, you know what? I'm going to take an extra hour in the gym this morning because I need to work through some things. I got some things happening that I need to just, right, give some more time to or whatever. I'm going to take an extra long walk. One of the things that Justin and I have incorporated just in our like weekly practices is a weekly walk. And those walks are so important to me because we have this one path that we take. And so we'll take the path and the first loop that we do will be all like work related things. And the second loop that we do will be like all family related things. And depending on how hot the topics are, we might, flip flop that, but we just do one loop per thing. And so we kind of have this rhythm built into our week, but also built into the way that we walk. That's like, hey, if I know there's something that's on my chest or I'm trying to work through, or like, I have a place that can go. And even just knowing that actually gives me a lot of peace. And so that for me, that's what works. I think that works for you too, Justin. I
Yeah.
think that's helpful. And so what is it for you though? Right? It might be something different. It might be every 2 weeks I get together with 3 other people at different organizations and we just get on the phone for 30 minutes. Maybe we don't talk about work at all, or maybe we don't, but it's just part of a routine that I have created some space for real self-care in the work that I'm doing.
And I think it's also important. I've seen quite a few people, and I try to do this, but I've seen a lot of people be very effective in maintaining their motivation by identifying what their scales are. So we talk a lot about scaling up and scalability, but they
Mm.
mean like, no, what are the kind of micro behaviors that I need in order to do this larger work? And how can I practice those scales like you would if you were learning an instrument? I have a solo, so I will practice scales. So if I say like my motivation and what I try to do is create a culture of inclusion by creating spaces for reflection by me listening, that means Justin has to practice not talking when he wants to. So part of my self-care, but also my scales is time and silence.
Mm.
I'm not listening to anything. I don't even have any calming sounds of nature, nothing. And I sit in silence
That would
and I
not
try
work
to,
for me, friends. I just want to point that out right now. That's the point here, though. Everybody has different things that
yeah,
work for different people. But
but
for
identify
me,
like what your micro
yeah,
behavior inclusive skill is and ways to practice it. Because then the next time I'm sitting in a conversation where I'm like, oh, no, don't do that. Or the next time I'm talking to somebody who has a completely different perspective of mine on diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'm at my limits of frustration, and we're in a big room of 70 people, and they're saying all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, I'm about ready to lose it. I can't believe this is happening. I'm able to, I've practiced silence and listening and able to reflect and ask questions so we can come to an understanding rather than me lashing out from my ego that doesn't make any grounds with that person and turns maybe other people in the room against the work as well.
when you said scale, I thought you were going to go in a totally different direction.
So I'm like musical scales, like I have a piano solo
Yeah,
this week.
no.
Dun, 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 dun,
No, what I
dun.
thought you were talking about is kind of like your levels, like understanding what your levels are. And I tell people this all the time too. It's not just in DEI work, it's actually in all kinds of different aspects of your life. But it is really important to understand where your lines are. So that's kind of what I thought you were talking about. And so like this idea that, I know like where my thresholds are, right? I can have all kinds of open conversations. I can work with people who have very differing opinions from me. I can listen to what they have to say. But I also know that even I, doing this work for as many years as I do, I have a limit, right? When I feel like somebody else's safety is being threatened, for example, that's a limit. Okay. We can have that conversation. But the minute you start to pull somebody else in and put them in a place where it feels, nope, that's not happening on my watch. Right. So I know that. And the only reason why I know that is because I had to reflect on what does that look like? How do I understand that? What would I do in that situation? And so I think thinking about the places that could be like really tough for you, right? The hardest places for you. So in those moments, like when I see somebody else might be harmed because of the way that an interaction is going, I have a whole set of scripts of things like, hey, we're going to have to switch courses right here. Or, you know what? That kind of conversation or the way that you're speaking is not going to work in this environment. If you and I want to have a separate conversation, we can go someplace else, but we're not going to do that right now. Right. Things like that. And they roll off my tongue. They didn't always roll off my tongue, but they roll off my tongue because I've done the reflection. I know where my line is. And so I think the other thing is that sometimes, like when we're talking to people, they haven't had that moment of reflection, and quite frankly, maybe haven't even had that experience where that was even part of their like, oh, this could really happen to me, or this could be a situation that I'm in. You like learn it in real time, and I think that those are the places where people get into sticky situations because they respond in a way that they don't like afterwards. So it's like almost like a double harm has happened, right? One, that they've been in a situation that push them outside of their scope, but two, that they responded in a way that they wouldn't have if they'd had some of that reflection. And so I always try and tell people, like, one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself in this space is just to understand like where your lines are and to come up with what Justin calls like your mini SOPs. So your mini standard operating procedures of what you would do if you got to that line.
I see a lot of people losing motivation because they are tired.
Mm,
Not because they're weak, not because of their failures. It's just they're tired.
yeah.
And I think a lot of the tiredness comes from being unclear about what they should say no to. And well, thank you. And I think a lot of what they have a hard time saying no to is they haven't found out, again, these micro SOPs, they haven't found out their core compass that helps them differentiate a trade off versus a cop out. So if anything comes to them, the people that I talk to quite often, they have in the back of their mind, either I am brave enough to go into this courageous space and do the good that needs to be done, or I'm copping out.
Mm,
No, there are other options as well. Part of it is, no, this is a trade off, or this is a calculated decision. This isn't my skill set, or no, for right now, because I'm doing this other thing, or no, but here's another person that can say yes to it. So I think, first of all, developing really your own mission, vision, values about deciding what does inclusion mean to you? What is your mission? What is your vision about, hey, if this thing were accomplished, my inclusion journey would be over? What are your values that guide what particular version of DEI or inclusion you are creating and you are skilled at and your life situation calls for? And then from that, almost a decision tree of micro SOPs based on this mission, vision, value statement. If this request comes, this is my response. If this, then this. If this, then this. But also a decision making tree. Part of it is a delegation system. If you're anything like me, and I imagine somewhat like you, it's very hard to say no because you feel like you're failing people. So I automatically come up with a list of people you would say, this person instead. So if someone comes to me, Justin, can you do this? I don't ever have to say no. I say, you know who would be great at that is this person over here, so that you can immediately redirect, because it's very hard for me to say no in the moment. It's easier for me to say yes a different way. So mission, vision, values for yourself, micro SOPs, decision tree, and a list of people that you could refer people to when you can't.
We've given you a lot of ideas. Hopefully, some of them are ones that you'll be able to use for yourself. We know that the work can be really hard, but it can also be really fun. And we have to be kind to ourselves. So much of the work that we're doing is actually modeling for other people what they could do. And so, if we want other people to be kind to one another, to be kind to themselves, then we have to be kind to ourselves too. And so, really trying to understand what that looks like for each of us as individuals is an important, very important part of doing this work and being able to not just do this work today, but to be able to do it tomorrow, the day after that, the day after that, right? How are we setting ourselves up for that long term success? So, very glad that you were with us this week and that you were able to tune into another episode of the Uplifting Impact podcast. We know that we need more people just like you to help us uplift the impact.
And in order to do so, please be sure to share this episode, comment on it by going to our website at upliftingimpact.com, or provide your thoughts directly to us at LinkedIn at Uplifting Impact, Justin Ponder and Deanna Singh.
And please make sure that in all of this work, you are taking the time to take care of yourself. You are so important. We cannot do this work alone. We depend on you significantly. But in all that, depending on you, looking to you for guidance, all that stuff, remember that you are important, you as an individual, and you deserve just as much love and compassion and empathy that you're showing to other people. You deserve it too. Until next week, keep on uplifting the impact.